Hello, fantastic people. I hope you're having a productive Friday. Happy Friday. I think it's time that we talk about security services. Now, we're seeing these organizations across America and internationally as well that are coming in to build resettlement camps and provide other services for immigrants, including undocumented immigrants. What brought this to my attention was the Minnesota assassination of House of Representative Melissa Hortman, as well as the attempted assassination of the senator from Minnesota as well by a man named Vance Bolter. Now, if you remember, Vance Bolter was an employee of Tim Walz, as was his wife. And he and his wife owned and operated a security service known as Praetorian. Now, if you're not familiar with Praetorian, it was the name of the guards, a military service for the Roman Empire. And they were also, not just were they guards for the emperor, but they were also policing citizens as well. And when I started reading all of this and watching this cover-up, like this assassination of a representative in America, I mean, that's terrible. And it looked like it was just brushed under the rug. And nobody even talks about it anymore. But when you get into these organizations that Walz and Bolter were associated with, including the Red Lion Group and this Praetorian Security Services, it starts to raise tremendous red flags. And it makes me wonder, are they training military-aged men that they're flying in from Africa? Are these militants? Are they already trained? Most of them probably are, because we know that the war has been going on over there for a long time. That's why there's so many refugees, right? I would assume that these are already trained military men who they're bringing over, and then they're training them for what purpose? Well, I think we've started to see what purpose. So let's just dig into these security services a little bit more. Now, we have accused Minnesota assassin Vance Bolter has ties to Middle East and Africa and runs security company. A Minnesota man being sought in connection with the Saturday morning assassination of state lawmaker and the shooting of another runs a security company and has ties to the Middle East and Africa. Vance Luther Bolter lists himself on LinkedIn as CEO of Red Lion Group, which is based in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Now, let's look into immigration records. In 2023, approximately 21,760 individuals from the Democratic Republic of Congo were admitted as refugees into the United States, making up a significant portion of the total number of refugees that year. This figure reflects the ongoing need for resettlement and support for Congolese refugees in the U.S. Now, the Biden administration, they set a refugee admissions goal of 125,000, starting at least in 2021. U.S. Refugees Admission, Refugee Council USA. Actual arrivals by region, October 1st, 2023 through September 30th, 2024, and you will see most of them are African. It's approximately 35,000 Africans who have resettled in America. Top 5 countries of origin. The number 1 is Democratic Republic of Congo, followed by Afghanistan, Venezuela, Syria, and Burma. Yeah, approximately 35,000 were African. Near East, South Asian, about 30,000. Latin American, 25,000. Governor Walz's refugee decision allows federal government to send Middle East refugees to Minnesota that Australia has refused. Why? Press reports indicate these refugees are mainly men. They're mainly men. That doesn't make any sense. Wouldn't you think that they'd mainly be women and children? But they're mainly men. From Sudan, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran, and Iraq. This is dated January 21st, 2020. Minnesota's Great Replacement, how mass migration is erasing the state's identity. Minnesota is being systemically transformed. its native population replaced, its cities turned into foreign enclaves, and its future rewritten through mass migration and skyrocketing immigration birth rates, all by design. Now, if you look at the census, you'll see that America's birth rate, like we become unsustainable as far as American citizens, our birth rates are going. We've actually seen a decline. However, if you look at the census and you include undocumented or illegal aliens, suddenly our birth rate is going up. It's not because of Americans. It is because of illegal immigrants. Minnesota is being radically transformed before our eyes. According to new figures, the state welcomed a staggering 130,000 new arrivals last year. This is dated February 19th, 2025. So in 2024, Joe Biden met his goal. Actually, he exceeded it by 5,000. Good for him. With tens of thousands coming in from foreign countries. This is not organic growth. This is not a natural population shift. This is deliberate. Over the past few decades, Minnesota has undergone a radical racial and cultural transformation. In '96, the state was 94% Caucasian, but today that number has dropped to about 75%, and that is drastic. That is a lot. 20% of the population. And it is projected to keep falling. According to the Minnesota State Demographic Center, the Caucasian population is expected to shrink by nearly 500,000 residents by 2055. And this article, I guess the Minnesota State Demographic Center uses like these really ambiguous terms. And they do that intentionally because they don't want you to know the real numbers. Like they'll say black, right? Black used to only mean African or West Indian Americans. Now they include Muslims, they include Indians, thanks to Kamala Harris, right? Pakistani, Middle Easterners are now considered black. And this is really unfair to the African American population. Indigenous. What do they mean by indigenous? American Indian population? Okay, so this says, let's read this. The white population, Caucasian population is expected to shrink by nearly 500,000 residents by 2055, while black, indigenous, and other non-white populations are growing exponentially. I do not believe you for 1 second, Minnesota State Demographic Center, that the American Indian population is growing exponentially. I do not believe that. So what do they mean by indigenous? Are they referring to Mexicans? Because we're hearing that California belongs to the Mexicans. Those are the indigenous. Even though it was Spanish and Mexico wasn't established back then. So these words, white, black, indigenous, and non-white, they are vague. They really tell us nothing. They tell us nothing. This is not a temporary shift. It is a permanent demographic re-engineering. The only thing it tells us is that Caucasians, the population is decreasing significantly, and likely non-American population is growing exponentially. The Somali refugee pipeline in particular has radically transformed Minneapolis, turning it into a hub for Islamic influence, political bloc voting, and cultural clashes. Minnesota is now home to the largest Somali population in the U.S., with estimates ranging from 64,000 to 94,000 people speaking Somali at home. The Cedar Riverside neighborhood in Minneapolis, known as Little Mogadishu, is a heavily concentrated Somali enclave with its own businesses, schools, and cultural institutions, all funded by the American citizens, mind you. This is not assimilation. Obviously, it's not. They're not assimilating. Not at all. This is not American. This is a parallel society building. Not only that, but Minneapolis has become a recruitment ground for terrorist groups like Al-Shabaab and ISIS. Federal authorities have tracked multiple cases of Somali men leaving the U.S. to fight for jihadist groups. So these are militants. These are jihadist militants that they're flying over. And again, like it said in that previous article, Waltz is bringing in primarily men. It's a one-way street. The U.S. rarely deports Somali migrants. even those convicted of violent crimes, gang activity, and fraud, because Somalia is considered a dangerous country. And why is it considered a dangerous country? Does it have a lot of active volcanoes? Does it have a lot of weird weather anomalies that make it dangerous? No, it is the Malian population. It is the people that make it dangerous. So why are we bringing people like that over here by the tens and thousands? There's only one reason, friends. They're not assimilating. It's an insurrection. My theory is that they are these democratic leaders in these sanctuary states, sanctuary cities, and communities are bringing in militants. They are bringing in men to train them. Train them much like the Praetorian Guard would, to protect their leaders. People like Johnson over in Illinois, right? He's got a large security team. Didn't we recently say that he has about 150 people protecting him? So not only are they protecting their emperors, but they're policing the citizens and terrorizing the citizens. And we're starting to see that, and I believe we're going to see a lot more, and we're going to see it a lot worse, because we are talking about hundreds of thousands of migrants, tens of thousands of African men, military-aged men, being brought over to the country, and they are not assimilating. In fact, if you look into these organizations who are helping them, you will see that they are training them how to avoid ICE and deportation and how to fight back. Let's keep reading. It is not hardworking middle-class Americans moving for jobs. It's not families seeking the American dream. The largest international influx into Minnesota comes from countries like Ethiopia, Mexico, Somalia, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and China. These are not nations with shared Western values. No, a lot of them are actually anti-American. Why would you bring in tens of thousands of anti-Americans? This is really fascinating information that is being completely overlooked by the media. And I'm sure a lot of people know what's going on too. State officials admit that immigration is fueling Minnesota's rapid transformation. The number of immigrants in Minnesota has surged by more than 30% since 2010, nearly twice the national growth rate. And they're not blending in. They are replacing the departing native-born population and reshaping the state's cultural fabric at a pace never seen before. Crime rates have skyrocketed in Somali-heavy areas of Minneapolis with rampant carjackings, gang violence, and welfare fraud schemes. The Somali community in Minnesota has been at the center of massive public assistance fraud investigations where millions of taxpayer dollars went for struggling families have instead been funneled overseas. And we saw that with Ilhan Omar and those restaurants she was working with that were actually stealing millions of COVID relief money that was supposed to be going to feeding families and children. Minnesota already has a housing crisis. Welfare rolls are exploding. Crime in cities like Minneapolis is out of control, and yet the same politicians who ignored the exodus of American citizens are gleefully rolling out the red carpet for tens of thousands of foreign arrivals. A strained, unsustainable system where law-abiding, tax-paying Minnesotans foot the bill for a never-ending influx of foreign nationals, and that is why Minnesotans are leaving. It's also absorbing a wave of secondary migration from other U.S. states, many of which are themselves major refugee resettlement hubs. More than 100,000 people moved to Minnesota from other U.S. states, including Wisconsin, North Dakota, Illinois, California, and Iowa. These states have significant refugee populations, meaning a portion of the so-called domestic migration could actually be previously resettled refugees relocating to Minnesota to join existing ethnic enclaves. And why? Why is Minnesota so appealing? What's going on here? This is precisely what Libya's Gaddafi predicted when he declared that conquest would not come through war, but through the womb. He was referring to Europe, but the same strategy is unfolding in Minnesota and across the United States. When birth rates among immigrants vastly outpace those of native-born Americans, the transformation is not just happening at the borders. It is happening in the maternity wards. In just one generation, Minnesota will be unrecognizable. And again, we have people like Governor Abbott to thank for that. He was trafficking, or I'm sorry, he was moving undocumented immigrants around America and sending them to places like Illinois and Minnesota, as well as other regions that have very high human trafficking rates. Refugee resettlement groups, many of them funded with taxpayer dollars, are profiting from placing migrants in Minnesota. This isn't about humanitarian aid, it's about money and political power. And if you've watched my other videos on NGOs, you will see that there are hundreds of millions of dollars being given to these NGOs and to these people and to these leaders and states who are bringing in illegal aliens. Actually, some organizations are actually getting billions to resettle and to provide aid and what have you to undocumented immigrants. And if you're wondering why the government is shut down, if you're wondering why Democratic leaders are so hell-bent on providing health care paid for by American citizens, free health care for undocumented illegal immigrants, why? Why are they so hell-bent on this? Why can't they accept no? I think that there's a reason. I think that they are so hell-bent on this mission to provide illegal immigrants free health care and other free services that we pay for, but are free to these illegal aliens. They are so hell-bent because I believe that promises were made. Yes, I believe that promises were made. And just like the Praetorian Guard of Rome, of the Roman Empire, where these specific guards were paid much more than the regular military guards were, paid far more than the legionaries, these Praetorian Guards. And not just that, but they were giving food and other perks, right? Many other benefits. I believe that Democratic leaders have promised these illegal, militant migrants not just financial benefits, but apparently other benefits as well. I'm sure they're feeding them, housing them, and I bet they promised them free health care. And I believe that they're hell-bent on getting this free health care to these militants. And that's why we're seeing the government shutdown, because they don't want to have to deal with the militants. They don't want to have to go back to their Praetorian Guards and tell them that they're not getting this free health care and all these benefits. They don't want to deal with them. That's what I think. I think that they're afraid to not follow through with their promises. I think that's what's going on. I mean, I hope I'm wrong, but I really do believe that we're going to see a rise in immigrant militants throughout the nation. There's a little bit more information about Congolese refugees coming to Minnesota. This is an organization through a church. Voice in the Wilderness organization is an on-site Woodland Hills partner ministry that provides support for Congolese both in Minnesota and the Democratic Republic of Congo. Cultural competency training, defined in Minnesota Administrative Rule, is required of all educators renewing in or after 2020. It includes racial, cultural, and socioeconomic groups, American Indian, Alaska Native students, religion, systemic racism, gender identity, including transgender students, of course, sexual orientation. These are teachers. This is training for teachers. The Minnesota Daily reported that the Minneapolis police created a new division for community outreach. So the police are creating organizations, divisions within themselves. In an effort to ease its relationship with the city's communities, the Minneapolis Police Department has created a new division to run all of its outreach initiatives. The Community and Collaborative Advancement Division, created earlier this month, will oversee and expand community outreach initiatives and introduce new programs. To whom? To illegal immigrants? To documented immigrants? or to American citizens? The MPD recently released 2 videos, one in Spanish and the other in Somali. Well, that answers your question. Answering concerns over the department's immigration policies. Which state that police officers cannot openly question people's immigration status and cannot undertake any action to find out a person's status. It's a stand down. I mean, these are states that want to defund the police. Additionally, it will create new initiatives in correspondence with the police department and community organizations. Having a division within the police department that deals entirely with community engagement and outreach is something that hasn't been attempted before. Ward 6 Council member Abdi Warsami said while the new division is a step in the right direction, there needs to be consistent cooperation between the community and the police. Who is this Abdi Warsami? Well, in his first run for elective office, Abdi Warsami won the race to represent Ward 6 on the Minneapolis City Council, soundly defeating incumbent Robert Lilligren, who was the first and only Native American City Council member. What hypocrisy. They removed the first and only indigenous American Indian politician and replaced him with a Somali-born. What hypocrites. He is among the first Somali Americans in the nation to win a municipal election. And what does he want to do? He wants to collaborate with the police department. Police department that isn't allowed to question immigration status. More information about the Voice in the Wilderness organization. It was established in 2012 by 2 Congolese Americans. And on-site partnerships. Community groups, we have rights. What to do when interacting with ICE. That's right, because you can control your police department, correct? Governors of and mayors of the sanctuary cities and states. You can control your police departments, but what about ICE? You can't control them. So you need to train your immigrants, your illegal aliens, on how to deal with ICE. Know your rights. Community groups. Trainings here. Know Your Rights workshop. Our communities keep each other safe, not police, not ICE or CPB. No, they don't want you to trust them. They don't want you to work with them. They want you to know how to fight police and federal agents. And they will give you the training. It's all right here at unitedwedream.org. Here we have the Congolese community of Minnesota, the CCMN Facebook page. Oh, this is interesting. Is that a picture of Malcolm X? Let's read here. Doesn't say, it's cut off. It's a quote. Not be the history that Brussels, Paris, Washington, or the UN will teach, but that which they will teach in the countries emancipated from colonialism and its puppets. They want history from these countries that were emancipated from colonialism. Are they trying to emancipate America from colonialism? Of course they are. It says so on their Facebook page. Come on, wake up, people. Come on, get with me. We're the puppets. They view us as puppets. And our nation needs to be emancipated from us. This is their Facebook page. And when I clicked on this link, it led nowhere. This is more from the Voice in the Wilderness organization, founded by refugees in 2012. The Refugee Social Services, Employment Services, Adult Education, Parenting Support, Youth Services, Legal and Immigration Services. This is all paid for by us. I guarantee it. This was dated March 2018. We are participating at a Congolese seminary event that is going to take place in Des Moines, Iowa. The event is going to be focusing on informing and educating our people about some of the basic laws and policies. The Des Moines Police Department and some other local organization will be present to help our community better understand how to navigate some of the system here in the U.S. The event is anticipated to have no less than 500 people from all states. Oh, and look at this. Back in October of 2021, Bishop praises Biden administration efforts on refugee admissions. Do you know what else is happening in October of 2021? Whistleblowers were coming forward to report that unaccompanied alien children, UACs, which is the technical term for unaccompanied alien children, whistleblowers were coming forward in October 2021 and prior to state that the UACs were being placed with unvetted sponsors who were related to traffickers from Romania as well as Latin American nations. Meanwhile, you have bishops praising the Biden administration for bringing in more refugees. U.S. military police walked past Afghan refugees at the village of Fort McCoy U.S. Army Base in Wisconsin, September 30th, 2021. This is Catholic News Services. The chairman of the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops Committee on Migration, October 11th, praised a plan by President Joe Biden to raise the refugee cap to $125,000 for fiscal year 2022. We have whistleblowers coming forward saying that migrant children are being placed with cartel members and known traffickers. And then you have this USCCB Bishops Committee praising Biden for bringing in more refugees. And as it turned out, the USCCB was caught trafficking children. We also urge Congress to provide the resources necessary to not only rebuild the refugee admissions program, but sustain it for the next 4 decades and beyond, the bishop said. Constant flow of kids. In November 2020, after winning the election, Biden said during a virtual Jesuit refugee service event that he would raise the cap on refugee numbers for fiscal year 2021. And he did. And he exceeded his numbers in 2024 by bringing in 130,000 refugees. Waltz appoints 7 new members to the Police Officer Standards and Training Board on February 11th, 2021. Remember, they wanted to defund the police and bring in members of the community to help police. And give me a break. AIC Helping Hands, a bridge to new beginnings. Our organization embodies compassion, support, bridge building, mentorship, and a commitment to fostering positive change. We don't just assist immigrants and refugees in surviving, we empower them to thrive in their new home. And we help them get into politics as well. And apparently I believe that they're training them, giving them military and police training, just like they're doing over in UK. And for those of you who do not know, the UK is shipping in migrants. I mean, we are talking boatloads. Again, tens to hundreds of thousands of migrants, illegal, undocumented, illegal aliens, and they are training them to police the citizens. And I believe that's exactly what's going on here because like we know, whatever happens in the UK, it takes about 6 months for it to trickle down into the democratic states and cities here in America. I will bet you that these democratic politicians are flying in military-aged men to train them for insurrection and rioting across America. And I believe that we're going to start seeing it more and more very, very soon. Maybe even with this No Kings protests. MIRAC resources, anti-deportation immigration resources, immigration case information, anti-deportation housing resources, police misconduct resources, protest and activism resources, organizing against border militarization and border camps. other organizations and national immigrant rights organizations. Resources for protesters and activists. Minnesota National Lawyers Guild Legal Hotline, Know Your Rights organization again. Minnesota Uprising Arrestee Support. Minnesota Freedom Fund, which is a bail fund for criminals to get them out and back on the streets, like we're seeing over and over again. Immigrant criminals, dangerous ones, being released 14 plus times, end up murdering people, molesting children. Minnesota Freedom Fund Bail Fund. What we do, the cash bail and immigration detention systems put a price on freedom that only a few can afford. How about you just not be a criminal and you stay out of jail? We make an impact. 4,805,000 paid for immigration bonds. 6,200,705 regranted to local partners. 20 million paid for cash bails. 2,978 people freed from wealth-based jailing. I think it's criminal-based jailing. A world without wealth-based jailing. Diversity crisis training for officers on tap in Minnesota. This is February 15th. Back in 2017, Minnesota lawmakers began moving Wednesday to require diversity training for law enforcement officers following 2 high-profile fatal shootings. Let's not worry about the criminals. Let's just focus on more training for the police officers. The legislation would also dedicate $1 million to help departments hire a more diverse workforce that matches the communities they serve. Hello? Approved $35 million in new programs. It's unclear what the new training would cover. Recognizing and valuing community diversity and cultural differences. No previous law enforcement experience? No problem. Our law enforcement training opportunity program is designed for applicants with no previous law enforcement experience and who have a 2- or 4-year degree in any discipline from a regionally accredited college or university. Get paid to train. So we had that NGO that was providing educational services for immigrants. And then we have these training programs for people within the community that represent the community they serve. So if it's a Somalian community, it's got to be a Somalian. Come on. I don't have to put this together for you guys. You know what I'm talking about here. You can see this, I'm sure. What are the current estimates of the undocumented illegal immigrant population in Minnesota? As an expert in temporary protected status, I must clarify that TPS does not specifically apply to undocumented or illegal immigrants. Instead, TPS is a temporary humanitarian program provided by the U.S. government to individuals from designated countries facing ongoing armed conflict, environmental disasters, or other extraordinary conditions. If you're seeking information on the undocumented illegal immigrant population in Minnesota, it's important to note that estimating the exact number of such individuals can be challenging due to the nature of their status. Well, yeah, especially when you have law enforcement isn't allowed to even check. Here we go, Red Lions Group. This is the organization that Bolter was associated with that was flying him to and from the Congo. There's a little bit more information. Vance Bolter posted on social media that he was the CEO of Red Lion Group for more than 3 years. More information about Somalian communities. In 2019, it was reported over the past 12 years, more men have joined or attempted to join a foreign terrorist organization from the largely Somalian demographic. UN SOS trains Somali security personnel on modern What is this? August of 2024. Soldier with the Somali National Armed Forces highlights the importance of training. Somali security forces complete Ethiopian-led training in Mogadishu. Somali troops train alongside U.S. forces in the military. Troops from Somalia's elite Danab or Lightning Brigade recently took part in this year's annual Justified Accord military exercise. This was on March 26, 2024. So Somali troops were training alongside U.S. forces. Exclusive. Somalia sends thousands of army recruits abroad. The Somali government has sent thousands of military recruits. Interesting. That was 3 days ago. More men and boys from a Somali American community in Minneapolis have joined or attempted to join a foreign terrorist organization over the past 12 years than any other jurisdiction in the country. Here we go. In March 26, 2024, Somali troops train alongside U.S. forces in Justified Accord military exercise. A U.S. soldier from the 2nd Security Forces Assistance Brigade observes Somali Danab soldiers conducting urban operations training during Justified Accord in 2024. Urban operations training. In Mogadishu, hundreds of newly trained Somali security personnel graduated Thursday after completing a 6-month training program conducted by Ethiopian forces under the African Union Support and Stabilization Mission in Somalia. The recruits underwent rigorous military drills, weapons handling exercises, and counterterrorism training, equipped them with essential skills to combat insurgent threats. I'm just curious if they're bringing them over too. I don't know why the U.S. would be training alongside of them. 99% Muslim, 43,000 Somali refugees settled in U.S. under Obama. That's dated November 28, 2016. So this has been going on for a very, very long time. Pretty much as long as the Bolters have been working for the Minnesota government. Oh, this talks about the one-man attack spree on the campus of Ohio State. So, Praetorian Group. Help immigrants in your community prepare for the possibility of interacting with ICE by reviewing the following resources. And again, this is a church organization for immigrants, and it's telling them what to do, right? In case they encounter ICE. Get involved in deportation defense. It's important that we continue growing our individual knowledge and skills to build stronger community power. Our deportation defense program ranges from beginner to advanced level trainings for undocumented community leaders, as well as allies who want to show up to fight alongside our immigrant communities. UnitedWeDream.org. Make no mistake, these states, the leadership in these sanctuary states, they know exactly what's going on. And these security services who want to build the encampments for these immigrants, whether they're documented or not, for these immigrants who many of which are affiliated with jihadist organizations, these security services, are they training them as well? Have you seen recently the group of Africans who all had the same, I think, matching clothes on, that have been showing up at these protests, these anti-ICE, liberation theological protests that we're seeing in these democratic sanctuary cities? and these ICE facilities in these democratic states. Have you seen them? They're wearing matching t-shirts. There was a group who kind of almost like engulfed, or they like just, I don't even know. It was so odd. You watch it yourself. You see what they do. Look at their clothing. Are these immigrants? Are these trained immigrants? Who are these? Are these people part of a church, Liberation Theology Church, that's recruiting military-aged men, indoctrinating them, training them to engage in this kind of behavior? This takes a lot of training, what they're doing here. This is like professional. Who's doing it? Are they documented? Are they American citizens? That's what we need to find out. So the Praetorian Guard, and remember, Praetorian is the name of the security service that Vance Bolter and Jenny Bolter, employees of Tim Walz, created, named after the Praetorian Guards of Rome. Now there were other guards. There were legionary guards as well, which is like regular army, I would say, regular military. The pay of the Praetorian was 3.5 times that of the legionary, augmented by prime editions of donativum, granted by each new emperor. This additional pay was the equivalent of several years of pay and was often repeated at important events of the empire or events that touched the imperial family, birthdays, births, and marriages. Major monetary distributions or food subsidies renewed and compensated the fidelity of the Praetorians following each failed particular attempted plot, such as the Messalina against Claudius in AD 48 or Piso against Nero in AD 65. The Praetorians received substantially higher pay than any other Roman soldier in any of the legions on a system known as sesquiplex stipendum, or by pay and a half. So the legionaries received 250 denaries. The guard received 375 per annum. Okay, it was just substantially more. They were also promised many perks. Now, why would the Democratic Party be so obsessed with getting health care, citizen paid, tax dollar paid, free health care, undocumented immigrants specifically? Why? Why is the Democratic leadership so obsessed with getting free health care? I think because it was promised. I think just like they promised the Praetorian Guards all these perks for their service back in the day to police the people, terrorize the citizens, essentially, is what they ended up doing. And they even terrorized the leadership because they got so powerful. I believe that our Democratic leaders have promised services and benefits to these militants who they're training. And they know that these militants, well, they're going to have to deal with them if they don't get them what they promised. That is what I believe is going on right now. That's what we're seeing across the nation. And these Democratic politicians in these sanctuary states. They are concerned that they're not going to be able to deliver on their promises to undocumented militant immigrants. Let's read a little bit more about this Praetorian Guard. Feared and dreaded by the population and by the Roman Senate, the Praetorians received no sympathy from the Roman people. In ancient Rome, praetors were either civic or military leaders. They were initially elite guards for military under the Republic. There were usually about 9 cohorts, each originally consisting of 500 men, and then increased to 1,000 men each. Makes you wonder how many cohorts they have now in these democratic states, these sanctuary states. The command of this cohort was assumed directly by the emperor and not by the Praetorian prefect, escorting the emperor and the members of the imperial family, and if necessary, to act as a sort of riot police. So they were also riot police. That's kind of interesting, don't you think? I certainly believe so. And I do believe that at these No Kings riots and these ICE riots across the country, we are going to see more, we're going to see a lot more African and Middle Eastern people showing up at these riots. I also believe that we're going to start seeing more of these African and Middle Eastern immigrants in law enforcement. I believe we're going to start seeing this very, very soon. The Praetorians, who were pillaging the palace, discovered Claudius, uncle of Caligula, hidden behind a curtain, needing an emperor to justify their own existence. They brought him forth to the Praetorian camp and proclaimed him emperor. The first emperor proclaimed by the Praetorian Guard. And then he compensated the guard with a prime bonus worth 5 years of their salary. The Praetorians accompanied Emperor Claudius to Britain in 43 AD. The guard transferred their allegiance to Nero through the influence of his Praetorian prefect, who exercised a beneficial influence on the new emperor during the first 8 years of his reign. So this military group ended up taking over. Just to give you an idea of what we're going to start seeing, I believe we're going to start seeing history repeat itself. I believe that these immigrants are being trained into some sort of military group, and we're going to start seeing them policing and rioting and insurrecting across the nation. This is what I truly believe is going on right now. And here's a little bit more information about the Praetorian Guard of Rome. They policed the Roman Empire. So, was Bolter training? I don't know. Here is a photograph of what they believe the Castra Praetoria look like. This was like basically the guards' encampment. Here's another one. And now this is an example of the encampments that the security service organizations are building. This one is a Garda-World encampment. Praetorian Guards, Minnesota headquarters, search result. You'll see them in military gear. These are trained militants. Here's some other photographs. Praetorian Guard Security Services, LLC. Well, it looks like there was one that was filed, registered in Alaska in 2012. And now we have one registered in 2018 in Minnesota. Or Bolter. This is an article saying that there is another Praetorian Guard organization that's saying that they have nothing to do with the Minnesota-based one. It's really interesting that there is another one. Like, why would you even name that your security group, Praetorian Guard? Such red flags. Bolter's wife listed as president and CEO. And Vance Bolter listed as director of security patrols. And I believe his brother was also in it, wasn't he? Todd? Here we go. Vance Luther Bolter is an American businessman and evangelist who traveled in Africa, Middle East, North America, and South America. He had a nonprofit called Revo Formation Ministries. Praetorian Guard Security Services, a company that provides residential armed home security in Minnesota, was registered to Vance and Jenny's address in Green Isle. She was listed as president and CEO, and his cousin Todd Bolter, a former police officer, was listed as a security training manager. Who were they training? Vance Bolter was traveling. He was flying over Congolese and people from other countries. He was working for Tim Walz, as was his wife Jenny. They were working with immigrants, and they owned a security service company. So who were they training? Vance worked as director of security patrols for Praetorian Guard Security Services. Okay, so let's look into Bolter's background. From 93 to 96, he went to St. Cloud State University in Minnesota, where he earned a bachelor's degree in international relations. And then he got a job for about 4 or 5 years working for Nestle and Gerber. Now remember, Nestle, those are the people who are buying up aquifers around the country because they don't believe that water is a human right. So international relations, Nestle and Gerber, and then 2008 to 2010, he attended Cardinal Stritch University again, where he earned his master's degree in management. 2011 to 2016, he got his PhD in leadership. 2004 2008, he worked at Johnsonville Sausage. And then 2008 to 2011, Del Monte. 2011 to April of 2016, Green Corps General Manager in Minnesota. And then appointed by Mark Dayton to serve as private sector representative to the Workforce Development Council of the Minnesota Governor from 2016 to 2019. Workforce Development Council of the Minnesota Governor, 2016. At that time, and then until 2021, he was 7-Eleven General Manager in Minneapolis, 7-Eleven. And then Tim Walz appointed him to serve on Minnesota Governor's Workforce Development Board again from 2019 to 2023. So he served on the Workforce Development Council of the Minnesota Governor from 2016 to 2023 for Mark Dayton and Tim Walz. And then I believe in 2010 is when his wife worked for the governor. It's not on here. From 21 to 23, he frequently visited the Democratic Republic of Congo. 2024, he turned 57. 2025, he shot John Hoffman, Yvette Hoffman, and then fatally shot Melissa Hortman and Mark Hortman. He's 6'1", 220 pounds, brown eyes, gray hair. In December 21, he became the CEO of Red Lion Group in the Democratic Republic of Congo. In 2021, he was working for Tim Walz at the time on Tim Walz's Workforce Development Board. And he was also operating Praetorian Guard Security Service and working for Red Lion Group. I mean, he's got a lot going on here. Doing a lot of traveling to the Congo while Tim Walz is flying them in. In August 2022, he participated in the Minnesota Africans United nonprofit virtual webinar about trade and investment in the Democratic Republic of Congo. 2023, his term as a business member on the Governor's Workforce Development Board ended. On the morning of June 14, 2025, he was seen in Minneapolis carrying a dark bag and wearing a light-colored cowboy hat, dark long-sleeve shirt, and light pants. He went on the run after he allegedly shot John, Yvette, Melissa, and Mark. After the shooting, law enforcement towed a black Ford Explorer equipped with police lights outside his residence in Green Isle. They never really explained that. That was all very, very suspicious. On June 15, 2025, he was arrested. Bolter also worked in home security. And again, here is more information about the filing of Praetorian Guard Security Services, LLC, under his wife's name. So, what's going on here? I don't know. And I recently saw this video, and it totally supports my theory that immigrants, militant immigrants, military-aged men from other countries, specifically in Africa, are being trained by, governors and even law enforcement in these democratic sanctuary states They're being trained, and they will soon be unleashed across America, is truly what I believe. And this video that I recently saw totally supports my theory. By the way, the person who is filming, I believe, is likely a part of this militant group. Just because they say wait for the looks on the white people faces. But most of the people are, first of all, not white. Most of them are, looks like African themselves. African American, though. African immigrants. So there are no weird looks. He says that they're scared, that nobody looks afraid. It's just really abnormal, and it's really inappropriate for a group of militants to swarm a playground. So what is this? What are they doing here? They're just making themselves known. It's like a warning, is what I believe. Look at this. Tell me what you think. Now, back in 2020 in Georgia, we saw this. Check this out. And then back in 2020, we saw this in Georgia. This is a group of uneducated or insurrectionists. I'm not sure which they are, because I haven't looked into them or not.
Remember, the Civil War
they
was
were
not
demanding,
slavery. It was
basically, it's cultural genocide. They're committing cultural genocide. And they're tearing down statues of men who were actually anti-slavery. So go figure that out, okay? You can't, because it's total BS. It's just cultural genocide. They're not opposing colonialism and slavery at all, because they're tearing down statues of men who put forward anti-slavery laws in America. So what are they doing? They're simply insurrectionists. That's all. It's cultural genocide. And I guarantee you that much more, much worse behavior is on its way. And I bet we're going to start seeing it at the No Kings events, and it is going to become more commonplace moving forward. Anyway, let me know what you think. If you have any more information, certainly share it. And again, look into other organizations, not just Red Lion and Praetorian. Look at the other states, the other democratic sanctuary states, and organizations like Garda World. And I'll be digging deeper and providing more information as it comes. So, fantastic day. Thank you so much for stopping by. And God bless.
Yeah, I'm getting these white people. Scared of motherfuckers.
I pray all who come to America come to know Jesus Christ.